Hey, and welcome to Turo Fitness Podcast, a podcast for people who want to get no BS information about fitness and know that fitness is about so much more than losing scale weight. It's about feeling confident in your skin and empowered in your life. I'm your host, Turo Virta, personal trainer, strength and nutrition coach, and most of all, a husband of my beautiful wife, Miriam. Each week, my guests and me will give you some no BS fitness tips and motivate you to take action in your own personal fitness journey as we talk about nutrition, exercise, mindset, personal development, and executing in life with enjoyable but still effective strategies. If your goal is to look better, feel and be strong and experience transformation from inside out, you, my friend, are in the right place. Thank you for jumping in, and now let's jump into today's episode. So welcome to Turo Fitness Podcast. Today we have the honor of hosting Dr. William Davis, a renowned figure in the field of health and wellness. So Dr. Davis is a cardiologist, author, New York Best Times best-selling author and a health advocate, and best known for his groundbreaking work and the uncovering of hidden dangers of modern wheat and a lot more. So really excited to have you, Dr. Davis, in my show. So thank you for
coming. Thank you, Turo. Thanks for inviting me.
If you like, I told a little bit about you, but do you have something in your own words what you would like to add? Tell a little bit about you from someone who doesn't know you, so about your career, where you are living, and
Well, I spent about 30 years practicing conventional medicine, specifically cardiology, doing procedures on people's hearts, and became very disillusioned with how that was met, especially after my mom died of sudden cardiac death, Turo. After her successful 2-vessel coronary angioplasty. So my mom died of the disease and the procedure that I was doing on other patients. And so it made me question the value of what I was doing, what I spent 17 years of education training to do. So it opened my eyes to the lack, the failures of modern healthcare in at least managing heart disease. So I started asking better questions, I think. How do we identify the potential for those kinds of things that happened to my mom a year, 2 years, 5 years ahead of time? The conventional answers look at your cholesterol values, which is so absurd, it's useless. The measures of cholesterol should have been abandoned decades ago, but they're still being used to predict potential for heart disease because it makes so much money for the pharmaceutical industry. But there are better ways to predict potential for heart attack, sudden cardiac death, need for heart procedures, but it's being ignored. That's the real tragedy. What goes on in healthcare is the real answers are often ignored or overlooked. And that's true also for, I know you and your audience are interested mostly in weight loss and muscle, what I call body composition. And so conventional healthcare is focusing on the most silly things, like GLP-1 agonists. Like Wegovy, Ozempic, Mounjaro, those injectable drugs that make you nauseated and reduce your interest in food and destroy your health. Yet they were approved, at least in the US, by the FDA, and it's making its way around the world because people think it's magical, it's a breakthrough, and they're not. They destroy health, and they do not improve body composition.
It's they are very like, obviously that marketing is I understand why they are doing so well. If you are somebody's if you take a person who have let's say 50 pounds to lose, and some other diet is promising you that you lose your appetite, you will get there within 5 weeks or 6 weeks, and other way is telling that you gotta train, it's getting hard, you gotta do some training, and if everything is going well, 50 pounds, it's like we are talking about like 4 to 6 months. So it's not a big surprise which solution is easier to sell for someone who is looking to lose 50 pounds. But can you explain a little bit about that relationship between that muscle loss and conventional weight loss methods like you mentioned?
So we know with good evidence, Turo, that when you lose weight by cutting calories, they say move more, eat less,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
push the plate away,
Oh yeah.
or smaller portion sizes.
Yeah.
So that's a version of reducing calories.
Mhm.
Or it could be one of those drugs that reduce your interest in food, make you nauseated, so
Mhm.
reducing calories.
Yeah.
Or a bariatric procedure like lap band or gastric bypass that
Mhm.
reduces stomach volume, also reducing calories. So,
Mhm.
regardless of the method used, when you reduce calories to lose weight, you do lose weight.
Mhm.
But as you point out, about 25% of the weight you lose is muscle.
Yeah.
So if you lose 40 pounds, maybe you paid $12,000, a lot
Mhm.
of money
Yeah.
to lose 40 pounds in one of those drugs. Or
Yeah.
maybe you paid $25,000 to have a gastric bypass surgery. So
Mhm.
you lose 40 pounds. Of that 40 pounds lost, 10 pounds is muscle.
Mhm.
Think about 10 pounds of beef on your kitchen table. It's a
Yeah.
lot of muscle.
Oh yeah.
And of course, as you know, when you lose that much muscle, we know that your basal metabolic rate, the rate at which you burn calories to live, to breathe,
Mhm.
to digest food, to manufacture skin and pancreas
Mhm.
and intestines, um, uh, your basal metabolic rate drops by about 25% for
Mhm.
years.
Oh
And
yeah.
that means you stop the drug, let's say, you lost 40 pounds, 10 pounds of which is muscle. You regain 32 to 34 pounds,
Mhm.
almost all fat, not muscle. So
Oh
you've
yeah.
lost that muscle essentially irreversibly. Your basal metabolic rate is lower. So even if you maintain a low calorie diet and exercise program, you regain the weight, almost all fat.
Yeah.
Now you're more at risk for type 2 diabetes, heart disease,
Mhm.
dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, breast cancer. Your risk is greater now. You're
Mhm.
worse off than you were at the start.
Oh yeah.
Yet this is the method advocated by most of my colleagues. Or we
Mhm.
could say bariatric surgery, drugs, or just cutting calories. These are
Mhm.
all recipes for disaster.
Mhm.
They cause your health to be worse. The good news is that's the bad news, right, Taro?
Yeah.
The good news is there are ways to not lose muscle, but they can't involve diet.
Yeah. No, because this is like obviously to lose body fat, it's still like you gotta be or create that calorie deficit. But if you only do that without aiming to maintain your muscle or doing fighting against that muscle loss, like you said, that's when you might end up, despite losing a lot of significant amount of weight, you might be in a lot worse place as in the beginning. And like you mentioned, you make your work a lot harder. Like even you end up losing that 40, 50 pounds of weight. Then the question is that what most people, and that's what they are not telling in those marketing stories, that how you're going to maintain it. Like if you lose a lot of muscle, the only way to maintain it is by eating less what you earlier did. So it's you have even less freedom, even less food what probably you were eating earlier already, which made you gain weight, and now you should be maintaining. And it's just a matter of willpower. Like, and you maybe you can keep it for a while, but I to be honest, I have barely never seen anyone who is able to maintain their healthy weight, healthy relationship with food while eating very little. So, what is then what's your like what methods you would use? You mentioned about
Well, we should point out, Taro, that a lot of my colleagues say, "Well, I'm going to have my patients use strength training,
oh
like
yeah.
go to the gym, use the
Mhm.
machines so that they maintain muscle." Does that
Mhm.
work? It does not work.
Mhm.
So, for instance, there was a very recent study at the National Institutes of Health here in the US
Mhm.
where these are really heavy people,
Mhm.
BMIs of 50 or more, really big
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
They were put on extreme low calorie diet and an incredible program, 2 hours per day, 2 hours per day,
Wow.
6 days a week.
Wow.
of aerobic exercise and strength training. So 12 hours a week of exercise.
That's a lot.
They lost 23 pounds of muscle
Yeah.
over 6 months, and their metabolic rate plummeted, dropped drastically, meaning they're guaranteed to regain fat when they stop the program, even if they maintain a low-calorie diet. So I stumbled on some of these things. I was doing a skin study because I formulated something that ladies love because they lose their wrinkles around their eyes and between the frown lines and their nasolabial fold and forehead. It reduces wrinkles. It has many other benefits also, but the ladies all say, we don't care about return of muscle or better immune system. We just want better skin. So I said, what? Okay. So we did a little skin trial, 25 ladies. And I said, don't change your diet, please. Don't change your exercise program. Just get these 4 things. A microbe that almost everybody has lost worldwide, Lactobacillus reuteri. Almost everybody's lost it because it's very susceptible to common antibiotics. And then bring back some nutrients that most people, this is much worse in the US than it is in Italy. But in the US, we've been told silly advice, Turo, silly advice to cut your fat and cholesterol, nonsense advice. But when people cut their fat and cholesterol, they abandoned the consumption of organ meats like brain and heart and tongue. Well, that means most people don't get very little collagen and hyaluronic acid. Those are common components of organ meats, and those have major effects on skin as well as other parts of the body. And this kind of fast food diet that Americans engage in, it's getting worse in the rest of the world also. And when you're getting your food from a fast food restaurant or microwavable food or processed foods, you've lost intake of carotenoids like beta-carotene, lutein, zeaxanthin, but especially astaxanthin. So I had these ladies get Lactobacillus reuteri, collagen peptides, hyaluronic acid, and astaxanthin orally as capsules. And their skin, they loved it. They lost their skin wrinkles. They had increased skin moisture, and their waists shrunk by an average of 7.5 centimeters.
Wow.
And this took me by surprise. Some of the ladies lost almost 22 centimeters off their waists. Now, even more interesting, they didn't lose weight. Now, how can you lose 22 centimeters off your waist and not lose weight? Muscle. They increased muscle. And so I stumbled. Tara, I accidentally found a way to increase muscle. When I did this personally, I'm in my 60s. I did this personally about 4 years ago or so. I gained 13 pounds of muscle in 3 weeks, and my strength increased by 50%. What the? And it took me by surprise. People often don't believe when I tell them that. So I would go to the gym, 15 minutes, Turo, 15 minutes once a week because I hate the gym. I hate it.
Yeah.
I'm doing lat pull downs, 130 pounds for 10 repetitions. By doing this, I was pulling down 200 pounds. So my strength increased by 50%. So I stumbled on a way to restore youthful muscle, lose abdominal fat, the opposite. And, when people take those drugs, those GLP-1 drugs, they have something called Ozempic face. They look 10 to 20 years older because they lose subcutaneous fat in the face and they lose muscle. We're seeing the opposite. People look 10 to 20 years younger and they're stronger and have more muscle. So it's a combination of restoring things that have been lost by modern people. That microbe, components of diet because of the silly advice to cut fat and cholesterol, and carotenoids because of reliance on ultra-processed foods.
So what is this method like? How you? Because I'm a fitness coach, and I'm curious to know what kind of training program you used, or what did you do to gain so much muscle in a so short period of time?
Turo, embarrassingly, I did almost nothing. I go maybe 15 minutes do two circuits through lat pull down, bench press, leg press, and then get the hell out because I can't stand going to the gym. You're a fitness buff. I don't like going to the gym. I'd rather go for a walk outside.
I don't like it either, to be honest. But I still do go because I know that it's what I need for my health in the future and what makes me actually feel the best after I do some workout. But I would be lying if I would say that I enjoy doing it.
Here's something interesting. I see the people who had more muscle when they were younger. Those are the people who gained back more muscles. When I was 18 years old, I would do a lot of bodybuilding and weightlifting, that kind of stuff. I lost it, of course, as I got older, but it comes back. So I see people who were weightlifters or ran track or anything that built muscle. They get more muscle. But even people who didn't have a lot of muscle, like those ladies, gain something like 7 to 8 pounds of muscle. So it's a restoration. So I remind people that as we age, we lose about a third of our muscle. So you see it in old men and ladies that have skinny arms and skinny legs. You lose muscle as you age compared to when you were 25 years old. It comes back. And that means your basal metabolic rate is higher. You have better control over weight and fat, and you're more flexible. You're more agile. You have better blood sugar, blood pressure. You're more likely to remain independent for a long time, not have to go to the nursing home or assisted living center or rely on a wheelchair or crutches. You're more likely to be independent and strong. So I think by accident, Turo, I stumbled on a way to maintain youthfulness.
So could you tell me then how it is related with the food? Like obviously you have a books available, but what are those peptides, collagen, what you just mentioned?
Well, this all happens. So in my clinical trial, nobody's diet was changed. They're just following their average diet. But all this works even better in the context of a better diet. So that what I try to do is convince people that the diet that our ancestors followed for the first 3 million years that we walked this planet, that's the diet. In other words, that's the diet that's programmed into our genetic code. If you saw a lion and it killed an animal and it opened its abdomen, ate its stomach and its intestines and its heart, and you say, oh, that's disgusting. So you put the lion in a cage and you make it eat kale and broccoli. What's going to happen to the lion? It's going to be dead within a few weeks, right? Because it has a very specific way of eating programmed into its genetic code. That's true for turtles and fish and frogs and deer. But we all have a style of eating programmed into our genetics. Humans are the same, but we forgot. And we think that going to the fast food restaurant, eating bread and ultra processed foods like corn chips and soft drinks, we think that's okay. It's not okay. It destroys health. You know, it's worse here in the US than it is in Italy. But obesity, of course, a huge problem. Type 2 diabetes, autoimmune diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, dementia, cancers, all skyrocketing because, and it was made worse, incredibly, Turo, because we have our federal government telling us things like cut fat and cholesterol, eat healthy whole grains, everything in moderation, all that nonsense that is absolutely not true if you look at diet in the context of what humans ate for the first 99.6% of our time on this planet. The incorporation of grains and then sugar, of course, into the diet was a very recent phenomenon. Here's a question. What happened to the first humans who consumed wild grains? This happened about 12,000 years ago in the Middle East, what is now Israel and Syria. What happened to the humans who were desperately hungry because maybe it was drought, maybe it was war, whatever. Something caused food to fall in short supply. So they looked at these wild grasses like einkorn wheat. And they learned that if they took the plant, isolated the seed from the husk, ground it with stones, put it in a bowl, added water, and heated over a fire, you could have a porridge, kind of like an oatmeal. And that was the first way that humans consume grain. What happened to those humans who went from killing animals, digging in the dirt for roots, gathering berries and leaves and wild plants? What happened to those first humans who ate wild einkorn wheat? Well, incredibly, Turo, before the incorporation of grains, there was almost no tooth decay. 1 to 3% of all teeth recovered prior to the age of consuming grains showed evidence of decay, tooth loss, abscess, infection, and misalignment. With the incorporation of wild einkorn wheat into the human diet, 16 to 49% of all teeth recovered showed cavities decay, abscess formation, misalignment. Now, so think about that. Before we ate grains, there was no toothbrushes. There was no dental floss. There was no fluoride toothpaste. There's no dentist. And there's almost no tooth decay, which makes sense, right? If wild living humans who are killing animals and digging in the dirt for roots and tubers, you have to have a full mouth of teeth to eat.
Yeah.
And so, of course, human history is filled with stories of struggles with tooth decay, having to use fake teeth, reaching the age of 20 with no teeth. And of course, in the modern world, we compensate for this with dental hygiene. Fluoridated toothpaste, toothbrushes, dental floss, going to the dentist, fake teeth, dentures, da. So, but we forgot that people who don't eat grains and sugars have almost no tooth decay. We forgot, but it's a great illustration of how inappropriate the consumption of grains is for our species.
So what is this? But is there some studies supporting this? Because this is a huge claim. Like obviously whole grains, like especially because that is something like if I think I'm originally coming from Finland, like it's always and also here in Italy, like whole grains, they are kind of like that they are considered healthy food, and people, you know, it's something what you should be aiming for to eat.
So there's actually a lot of evidence, but it's often misinterpreted. So, for instance, a lot of the arguments in favor of whole grains came from the Harvard School of Public Health. Frank Sachs, Frank Hughes, Walter Willett, and they this is how they do their research. I say, okay, Turo, what did you eat for breakfast on Monday? You say, I had a bowl of oatmeal, organic oatmeal in skim milk with a banana. What did you have for lunch? Oh, I had a rye sandwich, bologna sandwich with mayonnaise and some cottage cheese. What'd you have for dinner? We do that for about 5 days. Then I call you in 10 years. I say, Turo, has anything happened to you in health? Did you have colon cancer? Did you have heart disease? Did you have diabetes, right? Well, and then we try to relate what happened to you with your diet over those 5 days, 10 years earlier. Now, wait a minute. Over the 10 years, you got divorced. You drank too much alcohol. You went on several vacations in the Mediterranean. You fasted for a week. You had trouble at work. You changed jobs. You binge ate. You went to, in other words, in that span of 10 years, you did all kinds of crazy things because that's how humans are. And yet they're going to try to predict your health from 5 days of asking you what you ate 10 years. It's ridiculous. But this is the basis for dietary guidelines and most dietary thinking. Admittedly, it's very difficult to say to somebody, okay, Turo, we're going to provide your diet for the next 10 years. And we're not going to tell you what's in the diet. It's impossible, right? So they rely on this kind of, but this is the basis from almost all dietary thinking. It's absolute nonsense. Actually, most of the dietary wisdom comes from an unexpected place. It comes from anthropologists, people who've been studying what human health looked like all through the ages in different settings, tropical settings, ancient settings, more recent settings. These are the people who've known for decades that the incorporation of grains into the human diet was detrimental, had the devastating effect on human health. But it's not often talked about. We also have this problem in the modern world where the most popular topics, especially among my colleagues, the doctors, are the ones that make the most money. Healthcare industry, pharmaceutical industry, and the medical device industry.
Yeah. No, because this is obviously it's a nutrition, like giving that kind of advice is like what I try to prevent or try to avoid telling like which is the best. Like because for me, I have a feeling it's so individual, which works for uh, you might not work for me, and what I can say from my own experience, like it's often like what people are having like that it's better like if you try to live without wheat, try to live without whole grains and see what happens. But like here, like in Italy, like it's totally different. Like probably like there in America, like I feel it every time when I'm there. I have a I'm eating bread or something or just American food. I gotta say that I don't feel that well. I don't, if I eat an apple, it's not tasting the same if I eat it here in Italy. So obviously there is something like food industry is such a big thing and it's that quality what matters. Like obviously it's easy for me to say that, eat vegetables. I have a own garden where I can go to pick my tomatoes. I know I get my salads from somewhere like regionally, which is like, I know what I'm getting. And same thing with the meat or something like that. If I know mostly where that meat is coming from, I I have it's just a luxury what obviously all people don't have. And but that quality of food, it makes just such a big difference.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I've been doing with people is that microbe. So we did that clinical study of the
Mhm,
combination of Lactobacillus reuteri, marine sourced, by the way,
mhm,
collagen peptides,
mhm,
hyaluronic acid, and astaxanthin, the carotenoid. But I have people make yogurt. It's not yogurt. It looks and smells like yogurt with that microbe,
mhm,
Lactobacillus reuteri. It makes a fine yogurt. By the way, many microbes make a fine yogurt. When you buy yogurt at the store, it's got two microbes that are kind of boring.
mhm,
Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus. Not very interesting. That's why
mhm,
you eat yogurt from the store, nothing happens. It
mhm,
tastes good, but that's about it. Maybe it's got sugar and high fructose corn syrup and other things in it and
mhm,
emulsifying agents. But we make it and we use my method of extended fermentation. So microbes don't have sex, right?
mhm,
There's no male and female bacteria. They just double themselves. One
mhm,
becomes two, two becomes four, like that.
mhm,
Well, Lactobacillus reuteri, by the way, Reuteri, named after the German microbiologist who discovered this microbe in the breast milk of a German breastfeeding mother in 1962. He by the way, found it everywhere. In 1960s, it was everywhere in breast milk and bowel movements everywhere. As his 40-year career progressed, he had a harder and harder time finding it anymore. It disappeared. And but when we get this microbe, we ferment it. So Lactobacillus reuteri doubles every 3 hours at human body temperature. So we keep it at human body temperature for 36 hours, allow it to double around 12 times. I performed a method called flow cytometry to count the microbes, and we get about 300 billion per 120 cc's, 120
Wow.
milliliters or so, half cup serving. So we get these huge numbers. And when you consume this yogurt, you get all the effects we talked about: the increase in muscle,
Mhm,
decrease in appetite, decrease in skin wrinkles, uh, 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 because a lot of the effects are exerted by provoking the release of the hormone oxytocin from your brain. You get an increase in the intensity of love and affection for other people. You get an increase in generosity, an increase in the acceptance of other people's opinions. That's
mhm,
my favorite. There's an increase in libido. Older men get a 50% increase in growth hormone. Ladies get an increase in vaginal moisture. And in
mhm,
other words, we see this transformation: smoother skin,
mhm,
youthful muscle, greater intensity of affection for other people, generosity. It changes human life. That's just the micro, by the way, Turo. We can
mhm.
add those other things for improved body composition changes. But we've stumbled on a way to change body composition and to turn the clock back 10 or 20 years.
Wow, that's an amazing and big promise. So what dietary is there any dietary or exercise recommendations that you would recommend, or what you would say that this is absolutely no go, and this is something what you would need to eat or what you need to do?
You're talking about exercise?
Yeah, let's say start with the exercise. Yeah.
I'm not an exercise expert. You probably know more than I do, but I tell people just to do common things. Go for walks, ride your bike, go for a swim, plant flowers and vegetables in your garden. I'm not a big fan of these high intensity exercise. And it's always becoming clear that people who engage in very extreme exercise, one of the things we're seeing, for instance, people who run marathons or do triathlons and also do carb loading. They'll have the pasta the night before. They'll have energy bars and those sugary drinks. One, they're having diarrhea along the way. That's why they have those toilets along the way. But carb loading, and then we know with good evidence that the 24 hours after that event, there's a marked increase in intestinal permeability. And we know that means that bacterial breakdown products in the gastrointestinal tract will enter the bloodstream. That's called endotoxemia, which is extremely inflammatory. And we're seeing people develop neurodegenerative diseases from that experience, I believe. People who engage in long distance exercise, carb load, experience an increase in intestinal permeability, and then 15 years later, they have Parkinson's disease.
Wow.
It's a hard thing to prove, because if I said, Turo, we're going to have your people either, run a marathon and not carb load or carb load. It's hard to prove in humans. It's like cancer. It's hard to prove causation in cancer, because if I give you something that causes cancer, would you take it versus placebo? No, you're not going to take it. So it's very tough, but that's what we're seeing. So I think it's a bad idea to advocate these extremes of exercise. I think just doing common everyday things that involve activity and a little sweat is all people have to do.
No, that's a very, very surprising. I never heard about it actually. That Parkinson was that there is so many people, but they are obviously you can. It's like you said, it's almost impossible to prove. Because you can get Parkinson doesn't mean that. But would be interesting to see a statistic from extreme athletes who have got Parkinson or developed Parkinson at some point of their life, and if there is some kind of relationship with extreme sports.
One of the great things about the things we're talking about, restoring lost factors like collagen and hyaluronic acid. I set out to do this for skin purposes, but we also know with good evidence that collagen, ingesting orally, collagen rebuilds joint cartilage. And so it's a wonderful way to preserve the health of your joints. We know the hyaluronic acid increases collagen also. It stimulates collagen production in the skin and in joints, and also increases dermal moisture, so it makes your skin smoother. And it also increases the synovial fluid in your joints, the lubricating fluid in your joints. By the way, hyaluronic acid is one of the most underappreciated things. It's a fiber. Most fibers we get from plants, but hyaluronic acid is a rare exception. It's a fiber we get from animals. Wow. It's rich in brain, it's rich in skin and tongue, but most Americans, they say, yuck, I'm not going to eat that, but it's very important. Hyaluronic acid, very important for many aspects of health, but because it's a fiber, it also nourishes the microbes in your gastrointestinal tract. So it causes hyaluronic acid when ingested orally. Ladies put it on topically, not recognizing that its real magic is taken orally. That's how you get better skin, not just around the eyes, but on the neck, abdomen, thighs, elsewhere. Better joint health, better arterial health, because your arteries are lined with something called a glycocalyx. It's a signaling molecule and maintains the health of your arteries, and it's made of hyaluronic acid. But when you take hyaluronic acid orally, it nourishes microbes in your gastrointestinal tract that in turn produce a fatty acid called butyric acid. And that exerts all kinds of beneficial effects: better sleep, lower blood pressure, lower blood sugar, and better skin. Because ladies always want to know about the skin. Because
that
the
is.
butyric acid, the butyric acid causes acidic skin. Healthy skin is acidic, a pH of about 4.5. Unhealthy skin, someone with acne, psoriasis, rosacea, other rashes, they have less acidic skin, about a pH of about 5.5. So remember that the pH scale is logarithmic.
Mhm.
Difference between 4.5 and 5.5 is tenfold. So healthy skin is tenfold more acidic than unhealthy skin. Well, getting hyaluronic acid that converts by microbes in your gastrointestinal tract to butyric acid goes to the skin, acidifies the skin, discourages redness, skin rashes, etc. So restoring things that modern people have lost is spectacularly effective. Not treating things. We're not treating your skin with hyaluronic acid. We're not treating your gastrointestinal tract with lactobacillus reuteri. We're restoring things that you should have had all along in your lifestyle.
So what are those things like? Let's say now for better skin, maintaining muscle mass. What you nutrition wise, what you would say that include these foods most of the days or every day into your diet and avoid or try to avoid eating as much as possible some foods. Which foods you would first of all start to add?
The elimination of wheat, grains, and all sugars is extremely powerful for improving skin texture. When people do that for the first time, by the way, they lose around the eye puffiness. They lose a lot of seborrhea, skin redness, the rash. So that's a great start. We also address nutrients that are deficient in modern life. So modern people don't get magnesium because we have to filter our water. You have to, because water in the rivers has sewage and pesticides. So we have to filter our water, but water filtration removes all magnesium. We supplement vitamin D because most people work indoors, like you and I are doing right now. We wear clothes when we go outside in public. So we're shielded from the sun, and we lose the capacity to activate vitamin D in the skin with sun exposure as we get older, especially over age 40. So we replace nutrients like magnesium, vitamin D, iodine, and omega-3 fatty acids. The principal source of omega-3 fatty acids is consumption of brain. And no one eats brain anymore, at least not in the US.
Yeah, no,
And
it's not very common here either.
And of course, we can't eat all the fish we want because it's filled with mercury now, or shellfish filled with cadmium. So we got these modern problems. So we use supplements to work around our inability to get it the natural way. And then we restore lost microbes like that lactobacillus reuteri. So we talked about how lactobacillus reuteri sends a signal to your brain to release the hormone oxytocin. And that has huge effects. Thicker dermal layer of skin, you lose wrinkles, return of youthful muscle, increased libido, increased testosterone, increased vaginal moisture. But there's another aspect of lactobacillus reuteri's behavior that's really interesting. It's one of the few microbes that most microbes live in the colon, but lactobacillus reuteri lives in the small intestine and colon, the 24 feet of small intestine, stomach, duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, where it takes up residence and produces what are called bacteriocins. These are natural antibiotics effective against fecal microbes. What's happened in the US, and I believe in Italy and other parts of the world also, is about half the population, because of our exposure to antibiotics, pesticides, herbicides, glyphosate, that's the active ingredient in the herbicide Roundup, stomach acid blocking drugs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, emulsifying agents added to food like ice cream or salad dressing. All these things have screwed up our gastrointestinal microbiome. And one of the bad consequences is that fecal microbes that are supposed to be in the colon have been allowed to ascend into the 24 feet of small intestine. We call that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, SIBO. Well, when you restore reuteri and it takes up residence in the small intestine and produces bacteriocins effective against fecal microbes, you reduce populations of fecal microbes in the small intestine, you reduce that endotoxemia, and that adds to the effects. Increased muscle, reduced blood pressure, reduced blood sugar, reduced symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome, less bloating and diarrhea, less anxiety, less depression. In other words, you see this whole transformation of health simply just by restoring things lost from the human experience.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned about bloating, like, and I saw your book, Supercut. What is like? I often get the question like that the people are feeling bloated, or it obviously it's related. Sometimes it's obviously for women at a certain time of the month, but when it comes for food, what are the most? What is most common reasons for bloating or having like an unhealthy gut?
Wheat consumption, as breads, bagels, focaccia, all that stuff, is extremely disruptive to the human gastrointestinal tract because it's a gastrointestinal poison. There are toxic compounds in modern wheat, such as wheat germ agglutinin, not gluten, wheat germ agglutinin. Agglutinin means it makes blood clot, agglutination. That's true. When blood is exposed to wheat germ agglutinin in wheat, it causes blood clotting. But it's also a very potent bowel toxin. The gliadin protein of modern wheat, people say gluten, but it's really the gliadin protein within gluten, is extremely toxic to the human gastrointestinal tract. So that adds the bloating effect. So consumption of modern wheat, I say modern wheat because while wild wheat was a problem, it's been made much worse by agribusiness and genetics research. And that's why if you try to find a wheat field today, you'll see it's not what we thought. It's not the 2 meters high plant. It's, I have to convert to metric. It's more like a 30 centimeter tall plant, thick, stalk, big seeds, big seed head. It's very, very different from what we thought wheat used to be. So elimination of wheat, big step. But that other problem, the SIBO problem, caused by all the things that modern people are exposed to, like antibiotics, that's a major cause for bloating. And it makes people say things like this, Turo. They say things like, I can't eat tomatoes, I can't eat eggplant, I can't eat beans, I can't eat fruit, all these food intolerances that are in the US, it's really bad. People say, I can only eat 10 foods. Everything else makes me bloated or sick or gives me joint pain. This is very unnatural. The problem is not the food. The problem is your gastrointestinal microbiome because you've allowed fecal microbes to invade the 24 feet of small intestine. And while there's many things you can do to correct that, getting Lactobacillus rhodori back in your body is a big first step because of those unique properties, colonizing the small intestine, producing bacteriocins that kill fecal microbes.
So how you get it back? What are the ways to get it back?
Well, the first product I played with was a commercial product. So what happened was there was a series of very elegant studies in mice from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. This was a cancer group, and they were looking for the anti-cancer effects of this microbe, Lactobacillus rhodori. So Lactobacillus rhodori has been shown to have very potent cancer-preventing effects. It actually kills colon cancer, and it prevents polyps, at least in experimental animals. So they were doing some studies on the anti-cancer effects of Lactobacillus rhodori. They gave it to their mice, and they noticed something odd. Within a week, their fur, they said, was rich and luxuriant. So they started to study this. They found that if you gave a wound to the skin to this mouse, its healing time was cut in half. They found that the thickness of the dermis, so what we see on the surface, of course, is epidermis, that's dead skin, but below the epidermis is the dermis. That's where skin health is determined. Skin health and appearance is dependent on the dermis. And they saw an explosion in dermal thickness and dermal collagen. They also saw a threefold increase in testosterone. They also saw that if you fed the mice a terrible diet, mice without the microbe would get fat and old and lose their hair. Mice that got the rhodori stayed slender and young, died as young mice. In other words, they lived their full lives, but died looking like they were young. Mice who didn't get the reuteri got old, fat, and died as old mice. So
Yeah.
there was also dramatic increase in muscle. If you give an old mouse with atrophied muscle,
Yeah.
Lactobacillus reuteri, you get a marked increase in the volume of muscle cells such that it's indistinguishable from a young mouse. And that's what we're seeing in humans, of course. But anyway, so there a very elegant series of studies from MIT, a restoration of youthful immune response, acceleration of healing. So I got this microbe, and it turned out it was available commercially from Sweden.
Oh.
There's a company called BioGaia, and they had a product back then, it's back a few years, called Gastrus, Gastrus, for babies. Because when babies get this microbe, they have less regurgitation of breast milk or formula. They have a little less diarrhea after antibiotic. Okay, not very interesting, right? But that was the microbe studied by the MIT group. So I got the microbe commercially, and but the dose was so small because it was for infants. So I thought, how do we get it? Well, you could take, a big bunch of tablets, which is stupid. It's expensive and impractical. So I fermented it as something that looks like yogurt. And that's how we got the 300 billion per 120 cc's serving. And that's when I saw all the effects. Most of the time, Turo, if you see something happen in mice, it often doesn't translate into humans.
Yeah.
In this case, everything seen in mice, I'm seeing in humans. Muscle increase, improved acceleration of healing, increased libido. All those effects seen in mice, we're seeing in humans. Preservation of slenderness, reduction of abdominal fat. So that's what led to this whole experience with. So now you don't have to buy the Gastrus. You can buy Osfortis. It's a newer product because there was a study conducted that showed that Lactobacillus reuteri preserves bone density in older ladies. So we get it as Gastrus. Now we're also conducting studies to show. So one of the things you have to pay attention to with microbes is strain. Not just species. So Lactobacillus reuteri, that's the species. But the strain, in this case, the Gastrus or the Osfortis product, is the ATCC6475. And I'm sorry about this. I don't make this stuff up. It's the ATCC6475 strain. But there are 200 other strains or so of reuteri. So to illustrate, so you have E. coli, I have E. coli, your listeners have E. coli in your guts. What if you ate lettuce contaminated by cow manure and a different strain of reuteri? You can die of that strain. So same species, E. coli, different strain. So you have to pay attention to strain to some degree. So we've been conducting studies to see if there are strains that are as good at or better. We've only gotten so far with that. This is in animals. So it's all limited by budget. I'm not a pharmaceutical industry. I don't have billions and billions of dollars to fund my studies. So, but I hope over time I'll say, hey, Turo, here's a strain of reuteri that's as good or better than the original strain. But right now, the original strain is the BioGaia Gastrus or Osfortis strains we make because the dose they provide is so low. Microbes are very expensive. If you buy it from the manufacturer, you can pay a lot of money. That's why when you buy a commercial probiotic, the doses are really low, often a billion, sometimes a few million. The products are improving, but they typically have because microbes are very expensive. So here's a way at very low cost, to ferment the microbe and get super duper high counts. And by the way, it doesn't have to be reuteri. It could be other interesting microbes. It could be Lactobacillus gasseri that shrinks your waist. It could be Bacillus coagulans that preserves muscle, reduces muscle injury during strenuous exercise. So I asked my daughter to do Bacillus coagulans. She's a professional tennis player, and she had a concussion, and she had to not play for a year because she was getting migraine headaches and panic attacks when she tried to practice. So she took a year off, comes back. Well, she lost her ranking. She got as high as 26 in the world, but she lost her ranking, and now she has to qualify. When she's at Wimbledon or French Open or Italian Open, she has to play in the qualifying rounds, which are brutal because you have to play every day. The main draw you play every other day usually, in the qualifying rounds, you're playing every day. So if you're playing in Rome, for instance, you play 3 hours in a hot sun. You win, got to do it again tomorrow. You win, got to do it again next day. You get to the main draw, you're sore as heck, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, Bacillus coagulans reduces muscle injury by half.
Wow.
So you're more likely to recover faster. So someone like my daughter, not as sore. She'll still be sore, but not as sore and better prepared for the main draw. So that's Bacillus coagulans. In other words, Turo, we can take microbes and take them for very specific purposes. Improved immune response, improved libido, increased muscle, loss of abdominal fat. And these are microbes, for the most part, most of us have lost.
Oh, amazing! This is such a new information. Like, obviously, all these names they are not familiar for me too. Like, I'm in the end, I'm a fitness coach, and that's why it's such a fascinating to learn from you all these new kind of approaches, technologies which are available. So where to get those supplements? What you mentioned, those microbes and all what you mentioned.
I'm not sure where you get them in Italy, but the primary source is from that company in Sweden. In the US, there's a distributor called Everidis, Everidis. There's also a source. Amazon, though I'm losing faith in Amazon, too many fake products on Amazon. But you can get them in North America. I'm not sure exactly in Italy, but I know you can get it from Sweden, from the BioGaia company. BioGaia is BioGaia. It's inexpensive. The great thing about this, Turo, is once you buy the product, buy it once. You make the yogurt. It doesn't have to be, by the way, dairy. You can use other things. You can use coconut milk. You can use salsa, hummus, all kinds of things. You can ferment all kinds of things. But let's say yogurt. You make the yogurt once. You make future batches from a little of the prior batch. So you only have to get the microbe once. It's like growing tomatoes. You only have to buy seeds the first year. At the end of the growing season, you save some of the seeds from a tomato and you use that to grow your next year's tomatoes. Same thing with microbes. Buy it once.
Yeah, no, that's such a great advice. I gotta check it out. If it's usually this kind of stuff, like if it's available in Sweden, it should be in Italy too. As a European Union, all regulations should be pretty much same. But it's something what you gotta check out. So that was such a eye-opening conversation. So where people can find you, where you have amazing books. If you don't mind telling a little bit about your books, where to find you, where to follow your work, please.
I tried to summarize as much as I could in the most recent Super Gut book that tells you how to make these yogurts or other ways to ferment foods, as well as the diet and some of the nutrients. I will have a book coming out next year that will detail more about body composition. I can't talk about that one right now, but that'll talk about how to shift body composition in the day and age of this awful GLP-1 agonist drugs and other silly things like bariatric procedures. There are ways for people to gain control over body composition that have nothing to do with procedures or drugs. That'll be in the next book. I also have a kind of an umbrella website called drdavisinfinitehealth.com. I know that's awkward, but drdavisinfinitehealth.com. There's several thousand blog posts. There's several 100,000 discussion forum posts. And I have a weekly two-way Zoom like you and I are doing with about 100 people, typically on Wednesday evening or in your time, midnight. We do that once a week. We record them too, and we talk about these things. People say, I don't understand. Why are you fermenting Bacillus coagulans? Or I tried to make Lactobacillus gasseri yogurt. Didn't turn out. It smelled funny. So we have all those conversations, that two-way Zoom. And that's on the drdavisinfinitehealth.com website.
All right. Thank you. I will add those links to show notes. So thank you so much for your time, sharing your
Turo.
wisdom. I really, really appreciate it. Hold up, friend. Do you love Fit Me Turo Fitness podcast? If so, the best way to say thank you is to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on iTunes. I know every podcaster wants you to leave a review, but it's because those reviews help the podcast to reach more people. I truly want to know what you think, and if this particular episode resonated with you, would you also please share it? Either send a link to someone who you think will find it valuable, or take a screenshot and post it into your social media and tell your friends and family why they should listen it. Make sure you tag me so I can hear your feedback and give you a little love. And if you aren't already following me on Instagram or TikTok, that's the perfect time to hit that follow button. Thank you for being here and listening to Turo Fitness Podcast.